Yo, what's going on, guys? It's JMass, and I'm back again with another dope adventure. I was gonna say a dope New England adventure because that's kind of been my catchphrase. You know, I've been saying that in nearly every video on the JMass channel. But as you can clearly see behind me, I'm actually not in New England. In fact, this is my first non-New England video on the JMass channel because I am actually in New York City. Right behind me is the Manhattan skyline, and right over there, just out of view, is Queens. So today you have JMass in New York City. Pretty cool city. I'm excited to show you guys what's in store. So specifically, I'm on the island, Roosevelt Island, named after former President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It's actually right in the middle of the East River here in New York City, and to get here you actually need to take a tramway. I'll show you that at the very end of the video, but it's pretty cool. But nonetheless, I'm here at Roosevelt Island in New York City to show you a pretty cool, often forgotten and obscure abandoned location. This is actually called the Smallpox Hospital, or the Renwick Smallpox Hospital. It's an abandoned former smallpox hospital that was built in 1856 by James Renwick Jr. and it was eventually completely abandoned, closed down in the 1950s. And it was only in the 1970s when it became registered as a National Historic Site. Although ever since then, it's been completely in ruins. But nonetheless, I want to show you guys this very interesting, obscure, abandoned location here in New York City. Because, you know, when you think New York City, you don't really think abandoned locations or urbexing. But nonetheless, right here in the middle of the East River, there is one. So I'm going to show you guys, tell you a little bit more information about the abandoned smallpox hospital. And as always, don't forget to follow me on Instagram at JMassOfficial. That's at JMassOfficial. I do a lot of exploration, especially in urbex, obscure history, all throughout New England, and as of today, New York City. So yeah, let's go check it out, guys. I'm excited. Located right nearby the modern cityscape of Manhattan sits a building that completely contrasts with this style of glamorous architecture. The abandoned smallpox building, also known as the Renwick Ruin. This building was built in 1856 by James Renwick Jr., the lead architect behind it. And it was actually used primarily to treat smallpox patients. In fact, between 1856 and 1875, this hospital treated around 7,000 smallpox patients every year, specifically in the New York City area. Now, as you probably know, there is a vaccine for smallpox. It was actually invented in the late 1700s, but despite that, smallpox was still an extremely deadly and dangerous disease, even in the 1800s and 1900s. So this hospital was necessary to treat the massive smallpox epidemic that was in New York City at the time. This hospital primarily functioned between 1856 and 1875, although it later closed down in 1875 and became a nurses' dormitory, or a teaching school for nurses. Then later, it officially closed down as a whole in the 1950s, and ever since then, this building has been left to decay in ruins. So unfortunately, as you can probably tell, we can't actually get inside of this building. It is fenced off and under high security. But nonetheless, I'm going to show you guys some exterior shots of the smallpox hospital. Still really cool to see, really interesting and obscure piece of New York City history. I'm going to walk around the property, show you guys, give you a little more information, but let's check out the Renwick Ruin, or the smallpox hospital, here on Roosevelt Island. Pretty cool so far. So as we make our way over to the back end of the hospital, I just want to show you guys this side right here, which is actually the eastern face of the smallpox hospital. And this right here is the back side. So where I started the video was at the front end facing Manhattan. This is the back end here facing Queens. And still, as you can see, in a heavy state of decay and deterioration. Obviously, it's a major shame we can't get inside. It is heavily fenced off under tight security, but I still want to show you some exterior shots of the smallpox building. So another fun fact about this hospital is it was actually built here in 1856 when this island was known as Blackwell's Island. Today it's known as Roosevelt Island, obviously named after Franklin Delano Roosevelt, former president who was from New York. But at the time the smallpox hospital was built in the mid-1800s, this island was known as Blackwell's Island. It's actually gone through many name changes. I'll list a few below. Pretty cool though. This is the back end of the Smallpox Hospital. Kind of wish we could get inside, but even the exterior alone is really interesting. And as I mentioned earlier, like compared to the modern cityscape of New York City, it really does contrast heavily. You have this dilapidated stone structure just sitting right in between Manhattan and Queens, surrounded by skyscrapers. Pretty crazy. Although the structure was abandoned in the 1950s, it has received some recent renewal within the last few decades. It was taken over by the Landmarks Preservation Commission in 1975, where some of the structural walls were supported and reinforced to keep it from completely collapsing. It's also been declared a city landmark and is being protected by the city of New York. But you might be wondering what actually led this building to be completely abandoned, or at least what led the Smallpox Hospital to close. As I mentioned, the Smallpox Hospital itself was in operation from 1856 to 1875. Well, it's mostly because the island this is on, Roosevelt Island, then known as Blackwell's Island, was undergoing a massive population surge. And in fact, this island as a whole was just very densely populated. So if you think about it, having a massive structure filled with smallpox patients, you know, smallpox being a very infectious, deadly disease, concentrated on one location on an island with a lot of other people living here and a major city nearby, it's just a recipe for disaster. So they ended up closing this in 1875 when it became a nurses' school and with a dormitory. And then ever since then, the Smallpox Hospital was actually moved to another island, and that was the end of the Smallpox Hospital. But it did serve a good purpose, you know, treating 7,000 patients a year between that few decades span it existed. Also, another fun fact about this building, specifically the architecture of the building, it's actually built in a Gothic Revival style. If you don't know, Gothic Revival is an architectural style that originated in the 1700s in England. And it's seen here, one of the few Gothic Revival styles in New York City. Pretty cool. Contrasts very heavily with the skyline. But anyways, guys, that's really about it for the Smallpox Hospital, also known as the Renwick Ruin or the Renwick Smallpox Hospital here at Roosevelt Island. I wish I could go inside and show you a little more. I would love to actually explore the building itself, but it's fenced off and closed under scrutinous security, and I see why. It is a completely dilapidated building under a process of decay, and the city of New York considers it a landmark and doesn't want it to get further ruined. So I do get it, but nonetheless, I would like to explore it, and hopefully someday I'll get to peek inside. But next I need to head back to Manhattan. I have the rest of the day ahead of myself, and I want to show you guys really quick before the video ends, how do you get to and from Roosevelt Island from Manhattan? Well, it's not the way you might think. Yes, cars are allowed, you can drive here, but there's a more fun way, and why don't I show you? So if you're wondering how people get to and from Manhattan and Roosevelt Island, look no further than the Roosevelt Island Tramway. This is actually notable for being the first aerial tramway for commuting purposes in the United States, and it connects Manhattan and Roosevelt Island. Pretty cool, and in a few minutes I'm gonna take a ride in it myself, head back over and show you guys what it's like to ride the Roosevelt Island Tramway. Thank you guys again for joining me. I've been J-Mass as always, and this has been another dope adventure, this time here in New York City. You know, that was my first time ever exploring that site, the abandoned Smallpox Hospital ruins, also known as the Renwick Smallpox Hospital or just the Renwick Ruins. Really interesting and obscure location, has a very intriguing history to it. You know, it's weird finding the ruins of a Gothic Revival hospital here in New York City. You wouldn't expect it, but there it is. A really interesting abandoned location. It was used from 1856 to 1875 to treat thousands of smallpox patients until it was converted into a nurse's dormitory and then ultimately abandoned in the 1950s. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you found it just as interesting as I did. Very obscure New York location. I've been J-Mass as always, and hopefully I'll have some more New York City shit coming up, but I'll probably be back in New England again after this. Anyways, I've been J-Mass as always. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at JMassOfficial. That is at JMassOfficial. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. See you later.